The rain wasn't the coldest thing that night. Jason's hand pressed against my back was. He wasn't pushing me exactly. He was guiding me, repositioning me with the detached efficiency of someone moving furniture that no longer belonged in the room. "You understand, right?" he said, glancing down at his vintage Rolex. "The investors arrive in 20 minutes." And honestly, Rachel, the waddle, the swelling, it disrupts the aesthetic. I stood frozen on the porch of the house I kept immaculate, staring at the man I had married. "You're a liability to the brand right now," he added with a weary sigh, slipping a motel key into my palm. "Just stay there until you're not pregnant anymore." Then he closed the door. The lock clicked, and just like that, I was homeless. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't pound on the door, I didn't shout through the mail slot. I stared at the heavy oak, the one I had personally sanded and refinished last summer, and felt nothing. No devastation, no disbelief. Just a calm so sharp it was frightening. I walked to my car, the sensible sedan Jason despised because it clashed with his Aston Martin, and drove away. Rain smeared the city lights into glowing streaks, but my thoughts were painfully precise. This hadn't been a fight, it was a dismissal, a contract terminated. I should have recognized it sooner. Our marriage had never been a partnership, it was an endless open house. Jason was a luxury real estate broker in a city where image wasn't just important, it was currency. He didn't sell houses. He sold fantasies, clean lines, effortless wealth, modern perfection. And for the past 3 years, I had been the final staging detail in his most valuable listing, himself. People always asked why I quit my interior design job right after we married. Jason liked to say he wanted to spoil me, that he was traditional, that he wanted to provide. That was just branding. The reality was simpler and crueler. In Jason's world, a working wife suggested financial strain. A woman with her own career implied the man wasn't successful enough. A trophy wife, however, broadcasted abundance. I wasn't pushed out of my career because he wanted a homemaker. He couldn't have cared less about dinners or pressed shirts. We employed people for that. He needed a symbol, a quiet, refined display piece to stand beside him at galas, silently communicating to clients that he was wealthy enough to keep a capable woman idle. I had confused his control for concern. I thought he was shielding me. Watching the windshield wipers carve through the rain, I finally understood he wasn't protecting me, he was curating me. I was a mid-century accent chair, costly, attractive, and absolutely unacceptable if damaged. Pregnancy, however, isn't minimalist, it's swollen ankles, acid reflux. A body that refuses to obey clean architectural lines. By getting pregnant, I hadn't just changed, I had malfunctioned. I was no longer compatible with the room, so I was being sent to storage until repairs could be made. I pulled into the motel parking lot. The neon sign flickered overhead, the Grand View Hotel. It wasn't grand, but it was dry. I shut off the engine. I didn't cry. I didn't call my mother. I opened the glove compartment and took out the burner phone I'd bought 3 days earlier, the day I discovered the camera footage. I wasn't merely a discarded wife. I was a liability he had grossly underestimated. And it was time Jason learned what happens when the furniture starts rearranging itself. The room smelled of lemon cleaner and stale air. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the mini fridge hum. Standard double room, $89 a night. I stared at the peeling wallpaper and nearly laughed. It was absurd. I could have purchased this hotel, the entire chain, if I felt petty enough. And Jason, the man who'd just thrown me out for disrupting his visual harmony, had no idea. He believed I was Rachel, the scholarship kid from Ohio who liked interior design and quiet evenings. Alone, dependent, easy to manage. He didn't know my last name was Sterling. He didn't know my father was Robert Sterling, the man whose investment firm owned half the skyline Jason desperately tried to sell. He didn't know that a trust fund I hadn't touched since I was 21 held $66 million and compounding interest. I hadn't hidden it out of deceit. I hid it because I wanted to be loved honestly. Growing up, I watched how people looked at my father. They never saw a man, they saw a vault, a lever, a balance sheet. I wanted something different. I wanted to believe that if I showed up with nothing but sincerity and effort and someone chose me anyway, it would mean something. So I made myself smaller. I let Jason pay the mortgage. I let him lecture me about grocery budgets. I smiled while he bragged about commissions, acting impressed by $50,000 checks while my quarterly dividends quietly eclipsed his yearly income. I told myself I was being principled. That I was building trust rooted in character, not capital. I wasn't building trust. I was constructing a cage. By shrinking myself, by hiding my power, I hadn't found a man who loved me for me. I found a man who loved that I was controllable. Jason didn't admire my simplicity. He adored my dependence. The good girl act was nothing more than gold-plated restraints I had locked around my own wrists. I thought perfection would earn loyalty. But loyalty cannot be earned from someone who catalogs people like inventory. I looked at my reflection in the dark TV screen. The good girl was gone. She'd been abandoned on a porch in the rain. The woman sitting in that motel room was finished with tests. I didn't need to prove I could survive without my inheritance. I had survived his ego, his neglect, his quiet cruelty. Now it was time to stop surviving and start liquidating. I pulled my laptop from my bag. I wasn't calling my father for rescue. I wasn't asking for help. I logged into accounts untouched for 4 years. Password entered. The screen flooded my face with the blue glow of 8-figure balances. Jason wanted to play Among Titans. Fine. He was about to meet one, and she was furious. 3 days later, I was back in the house. Not physically. I wouldn't step into that mausoleum again without protective gear, but digitally. Before leaving, I had installed a high-end nanny cam in the nursery, motion activated, cloud synced. I'd bought it to watch my baby sleep. Now it was documenting the collapse of my marriage. I sat in the motel room scrolling through alerts. Motion detected nursery, 2:14 p.m. I hit play. The room appeared on screen, freshly painted soft yellow. The crib I'd assembled myself stood in the corner. Jason was there, and he wasn't alone. Kimberly stood beside him. I recognized her immediately, a fitness influencer Jason occasionally hired for staging. Her entire identity curated in green juice and ob definition. She leaned against the changing table, laughing. "It's so beige," she said, dragging manicured fingers across the mobile I'd sewn by hand. "Are you actually keeping this?" Jason laughed, a sound that made my stomach tighten. He paced, checking his phone. "God, no, it's wasted square footage. Do you know how much value a home office adds in this zip code?" But Rachel insisted the baby needs a sanctuary. He mocked my voice high and whiny. "She's so nesting." Kimberly giggled. "It's exhausting," Jason corrected. He walked to the crib and nudged it with his foot. "Look at this thing, it's massive. Where am I supposed to put my Peloton?" He scoffed. "Seriously, Kim, the kid isn't even here yet and it's already taking over. It'll destroy my sleep schedule. It'll kill the vibe of the house." Then with a shrug, "I didn't sign up for a roommate who cries and shits itself." I froze, rewound. "It's going to ruin the vibe. This wasn't just cruelty. It was pathology." Jason didn't resent inconvenience. He resented competition. In his universe, there was only space for one center of gravity, one star, one set of needs that mattered. A baby wasn't joy, it was a rival, a tiny, demanding threat to the attention he believed belonged solely to him. He wasn't afraid of being a bad father. He was afraid of being overshadowed. A narcissistic injury. My pregnancy had shifted the spotlight from him to me and soon to the child. He couldn't tolerate that. That's why I was a liability. That's why I was evicted. Because I was growing something that would eclipse him. I watched Kimberly pull him into a kiss in the middle of the nursery, defiling the only sincere room in that house, but I didn't feel jealousy. I felt a cold, hard resolve clicking into place like a safety latch being removed from a weapon. He hated the baby because it threatened his ego. He hated me because I was no longer a perfect mirror. He thought he was the king of his little castle surrounded by admirers and props. He didn't realize the castle was built on sand and the tide was coming in fast. I closed the laptop. I wasn't sad anymore. I was ready. He wanted to protect his precious spotlight. Fine. I was about to turn the stage lights up so high they would burn him alive. My phone felt heavy in my hand, not with hesitation, but with the weight of the weapon I was about to fire. I dialed the number I hadn't called in 4 years. It rang once. "Rachel," my father's voice was rough, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "But it's going to be. I don't need you to come get me, Dad, and I don't need a loan. I need to make a business transaction." "What kind of transaction?" "A hostile takeover," I said. "I want to buy the Summit penthouse and I want Jason to be the broker." There was a pause on the line, heavy with unspoken questions, followed by the slow, grim realization of a man who built an empire on crushing competitors. "The Summit, that's a $40 million listing. Jason doesn't handle that weight class. He will if he thinks he's being scouted by Sterling Capital." I want him to believe he's landed the whale. I want him to taste that commission. I want him to spend it in his head before he even signs the contract. And then when he's leveraged everything he has to close the deal, I want to walk into the room. Consider it done, my father said. The warmth in his voice was gone, replaced by the steel of the CEO. I'll have Marcus call him within the hour. The Trojan horse is ready. I hung up. It wasn't a conversation between a father and daughter. It was a strategy session between majority shareholders. The trap was set beautifully. Marcus, my father's CFO, made the call at 9 a.m. sharp. He played the part perfectly. The impatient, high-powered executive representing a mystery buyer who valued privacy above all else. He told Jason that the buyer wanted the Summit penthouse cash offer no contingencies, but demanded a broker who could handle exclusive high-velocity demands. I didn't need a nanny cam to know how Jason reacted. I knew him. He would have taken the call in his home office, probably leaning back in his chair, trying to sound bored while his heart hammered against his ribs. This was the deal he had spent his life chasing. $1 million commission in a single afternoon. It was his ticket to the big leagues. It was validation. And true to form, Jason let his greed do the heavy lifting. Marcus told him the buyer required a good faith gesture. Exclusive access to the property for the signing stage to specific exorbitant standards, paid for upfront by the broker to demonstrate commitment to the luxury standard. It was a test, Marcus said, a test of liquidity and class. Jason didn't have the liquidity, but he had the ego. I watched the movement on our joint accounts, the ones he thought I was too stupid to monitor. He drained the savings. He maxed out the business line of credit. He even took a high-interest short-term loan against the equity of the firm he worked for, likely forging a signature or two. Convinced that the commission check would clear in 48 hours and cover the crater he was digging. He spent nearly $80,000 in 24 hours booking florists, caterers, and renting high-end art to stage a penthouse that didn't need staging. He was leveraging assets he didn't have to impress a client who didn't exist. He wasn't just buying flowers, he was buying his own hype. He thought he was investing in his future. He didn't realize he was financing his own execution. He called me that night, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. Rachel, he said, sounding breathless, I've got huge news, massive. When this deal closes tomorrow, we're going to have a serious talk about your attitude. I'm about to become the biggest name in this city. You might want to rethink that hotel stay. I'm rethinking everything, Jason. I said, good luck with the closing. Luck is for losers. He scoffed. I hung up and checked my reflection in the mirror. He was right. It did take skill to destroy a man without ever touching him. And tomorrow I was going to give him a master class. The boardroom of the Summit Tower felt less like a meeting space and more like a predator's observation deck. Floor-to-ceiling glass offered a panoramic view of the city Jason believed he now owned. He was sitting at the head of the mahogany table, spinning a fountain pen between his fingers. Kimberly was there too, ostensibly as his staging consultant, though she was currently taking selfies against the skyline, checking her angles in the reflection of the window. Stop fidgeting, Kim, Jason snapped, though he was smiling. This is the big leagues. Act like you've been here before. I'm just excited, she pouted, sliding into the chair next to him. $40 million, that commission is going to buy us a lot of green juice. It's going to buy us a legacy, he corrected. He checked his watch. They're late, typical power move. Make the broker sweat, he laughed, leaning back, putting his feet up on the edge of the $3,000 chair. Let them play their games. I've got the staging perfect. I fronted the costs. I proved I'm the only one in this city with the liquidity to handle a deal this size. Once they sign, I'm untouchable. The double doors opened. Jason swung his legs down, straightening his tie. Marcus walked in. He was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, gray suit, gray hair, gray expression. He didn't look at Jason. He didn't look at Kimberly. He placed a single file folder on the table. Mr. Sterling, Jason said, standing up, extending a hand. Pleasure. As you can see, the unit is pristine. We're ready to execute. Marcus didn't shake his hand. I am not Mr. Sterling, he said, his voice flat. I am the CFO. Mr. Sterling does not attend residential closings. However, the principal owner of the holding company insisted on being here personally to review the final contingencies. Jason blinked his smile, faltering for a microsecond. The owner of the building of the company buying it, Marcus corrected, And the company that owns the brokerage you work for? Jason frowned. I don't. My agency is independent. Your agency was acquired this morning, Marcus said, checking his phone. Hostile takeover. It was quite efficient. He turned toward the doors. Madam Vice President, we are ready for you. The doors swung open again. The woman who walked in wasn't waddling. She wasn't swollen. She was gliding. She wore a tailored Black Power suit that accommodated her pregnancy, not as a burden but as a fact of nature. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant sheen. She didn't look at the view. She looked directly at the head of the table. Jason's face went slack. It wasn't just shock, it was a malfunction. He looked from Marcus to the woman, his brain failing to bridge the gap between the weeping wife he'd evicted and the titan standing before him. Rachel, he whispered. The word sounded ridiculous in the silence of the room. Sit down, Jason, I said. My voice wasn't shrill. It wasn't the voice of the woman who asked permission to buy organic milk. It was the voice of the majority shareholder. What are you doing here? He looked frantically at Kimberly, who had frozen mid-selfie. This is a private closing. You can't be here. I told you you're a liability. I'm not a liability, I interrupted, walking to the head of the table. I'm the vice president of Sterling Capital, and I'm the one buying this penthouse. I reached into the folder Marcus had laid down. I didn't pull out a real estate contract. I pulled out a thick stack of documents stapled with blue legal paper. You wanted to impress the client, Jason. You wanted to show you had skin in the game. I slid the papers across the mahogany. They stopped exactly at the edge of the table right in front of him. Congratulations, you have our attention. He stared at the papers. That, I said, pointing to the top document, is a summary of the $80,000 you embezzled from your firm's escrow account to pay for the staging of this unit. Fraud. Jason, it's a felony. His face drained of color. I was going to put it back once the commission cleared. There is no commission, I said, because there is no deal. Sterling Capital isn't buying this unit from you. We already own the building. We just acquired the debt on your agency, which means we now own the audit trail of every illegal loan you took out in the last 48 hours. I motioned to Marcus. Show him the rest. Marcus stepped forward. We have also notified the licensing board. Your broker's license has been suspended pending investigation, and the short-term loan you secured against your personal assets. That was through a subsidiary of ours. Immediately, Jason stood up his chair, scraping violently against the floor. Rachel, stop this. I did this for us. I wanted to be big for us. You can't destroy me because I was ambitious. I'm not destroying you because you were ambitious, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I'm evicting you because you were cruel. I placed the second document on the table, divorce papers. You called our child a liability. You called me furniture. You brought her. I gestured to Kimberly, who was now shrinking into her chair into our nursery. You treated your life like a showroom and your family like props. Well, the lease is up. I leaned over the table, getting close enough that he could see the clarity in my eyes. You aren't a broker anymore, Jason. You aren't a husband. You are a bad investment, and I am liquidating. You can't do this. He stammered, looking around the room as if an audience might save him. I'm Jason Miller. I'm a brand. You're a tenant, I corrected, and you have 24 hours to vacate my property. All of it. I turned to Marcus. Have security escort them out. And Marcus, have the nursery repainted. The vibe in there is terrible. I turned and walked out of the boardroom without looking back. I didn't need to see the ruin. I had already seen the blueprints. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely public. In the world of high-stakes real estate, reputation is currency, and Jason had just filed for bankruptcy. By the time he reached the lobby of the Summit Tower, his agency had already drafted his termination letter. Gross misconduct, attempted fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. The label stuck to him like tar. The brand of Jason Miller wasn't just damaged, it was liquidated. I heard he tried to spin it for a few weeks. He told people he was going independent, that he was pivoting to consulting, but the city knew, the developers knew. And without the access, without the credit lines, without the showroom wife to anchor his image, he simply faded. He lost the Aston Martin, he lost the condo. Kimberly moved on to a personal trainer with a larger following before the first credit card bill bounced. Jason was left with exactly what he had brought to the table, an empty suit and an ego that couldn't pay the rent. 6 months later, my life looks very different. I am sitting on the floor of my living room. It isn't a penthouse. It's a sprawling older house with creaky floorboards and a garden that needs weeding. There is a pile of laundry on the sofa. There are brightly colored blocks scattered across the rug. It isn't sleek, it isn't beige, it is messy, chaotic, and vibrant, and it is mine. I look down at the baby in my arms. Leo, he is drooling on my silk blouse, and I don't care. I don't worry about the aesthetic. I don't worry about the vibe. I worry about the quarterly reports for the Sterling Foundation, which I am now running, and I worry about whether Leo is warm enough. My father comes over on Sundays. He doesn't talk about business much anymore. He sits on the floor and builds block towers trying to make his grandson laugh. He told me once that he regretted teaching me to be quiet. He said he should have taught me to roar. I told him I didn't need to roar, I just needed to stop whispering. I often think about the woman who sat in that hotel room, terrified and pregnant, calculating her worth based on how well she could hide her power. I want to tell her that the good girl trophy she was polishing was actually a participation award for her own eraser. I want to tell her that love isn't about fitting into someone else's blueprint. I realized something during the eviction of my husband. There is a difference between net worth and self-worth. My net worth was always high, hidden in trust funds and portfolios. But my self-worth had been in the negatives because I believed that being low maintenance was a virtue. It isn't. It is an invitation for people like Jason to treat you like a fixture. I am not low maintenance anymore. I am high standards. I don't shrink to fit the room. I buy the building. And if anyone ever tells me again that I am taking up too much space or that my reality is ruining their aesthetic, I won't apologize. I will show them the door. Sometimes the people who claim to love us are just loving the space we take up in their showroom. Share this story if you've ever had to reclaim your own worth. You are not furniture.